The Fast and the Furious is known for its outlandish and frankly ridiculous stunts. We're going to count down the craziest 6 and give you a behind-the-scenes look of how they were done. Stick around to the end when we'll be revealing the most insane one. Number 6, Furious 7, dropping cars from planes. We're starting with a truly crazy stunt that was done for real. When the team behind Fast and the Furious decided to parachute cars out of planes, they probably had some digital special effects in mind, but 30-year stunt veteran Spur had other ideas. After relying too much on CGI in earlier films, Furious 7 director James Wan was more than happy to let Rizatos drop cars thousands of feet above the mountains of Colorado for real. After months of planning, the stunt was ready. To avoid the destruction of footage, cameras needed to be mounted where they couldn't be crushed. Easier said than done when you're dropping cars out of the sky. The crew needed to figure out a safe way to get the cars out of the plane so they wouldn't get stuck. 2 planes dropped 2 cars each from 12,000 feet. Either brave or crazy skydivers would jump out at the same time or just after to get the shots the crew needed. But loose debris, helicopter blades and flying cars made the stunt more frightening than Vin Diesel running out of protein. At one point, a skydiver lost his footing and bounced off the rear exit hatch, but thankfully he was fine. So was the final edit of this scene, and we'll be revisiting Furious 7 for another crazy stunt later in the video. Number 5, Too Fast, Too Furious, landing on a moving boat. Way back in 2003, the Fast and the Furious stunts were still wild. With more cash and resources to play with following the success of the first Fast and Furious movie, its sequel didn't disappoint, especially with the climactic stunt of landing a Chevy Camaro onto a yacht. Just like the plane jump sequence, this one took months of planning as all the sets needed to be tested before executing the jump. It was so complex, a computer-generated animation of the scene was even commissioned to make sure everyone knew what they were doing. A bespoke ramp was built to launch the car at the right angle. This was twinned with a pulley system to send it flying, but also to make sure it didn't total a $5 million boat by smashing into the middle of it. It'd be a brave man to deliver that news to the studio or the owner of the yacht. The jump was 100% real, but no one was in the car at the time, unless you're counting 2 dummies made to look like lead characters Brian and Roman. Then the abrupt meeting of boat and car was mocked up on the safety of land, using a fake deck and some explosives. The producers returned back to the boat afterwards to get the shots they needed for the worse-for-wear Camaro on top of the yacht. And if you think that jump was extreme, keep watching for the last stunt on this list at the end of the video. Number 4, Fast and Furious 6, Tank Carnage. You know things are going to get crazy when someone steals a tank. The one that Owen Shaw gets in Fast and Furious 6 was a real FV4201 Chieftain, a 56-ton British battle tank with a 750 brake horsepower engine and a 120mm gun. This was another scene that was meant to be CGI, but in the end became absolute carnage for real. 250 cars were destroyed along a 3-mile stretch in Tenerife, lined with holiday resorts that were removed during post-production. And speaking of post-production, this sequence, although mostly real, also features a couple of the most ridiculous shots in the whole franchise that defy physics entirely. How can we forget when Dom rescues Letty in a way that wouldn't be out of place in a Marvel movie, and similarly when Roman goes flying from the tank to a car like a flying squirrel? It's fair to say that these scenes and the tank flip had just a little bit of help from Mr. CGI. But our next sequence was, amazingly, done for real. Number 3, Fast 5, Bank Vault Heist. Fast 5 represented a turning point in the franchise. It turned it more into a straight action series rather than just focusing on cars, but it also pushed what stunts were possible, even if they were completely crazy. This is where the production team, and in particular director Justin Lin, got the idea to drag a giant bank vault around a city and use it as a weapon in the process. For this amazing sequence, Lin was adamant the CGI would be limited when it came to the carnage. He insisted they build a vault, tow it around, and see what happens. It soon became clear that the stunt crew needed some sort of control over the heavy metal cube, and that involved custom making a steerable vault, not your average day's work. They did this by sawing the back part off a heavy-duty pickup, putting the vault over the top of it to hide the thing, while adding tiny viewing holes in the front and on the side so they could see where they were going. So this solved the problem of moving it down the streets pulled by Dom and Brian's Chargers, but to have this unorthodox tow load smash through a bank for real was a different challenge altogether. The special effects team built another vault that had an axle through the middle of it. This gave it the roll effect the director wanted. Then a bespoke lead-up track needed to be built so it could pick up some speed and start tumbling once it had smashed its way through the building. Add to this the fact that real stunt actors were used to act as customers and dodge the vault, then you've got a very dangerous but amazing stunt that looked great on camera. And this is before they even get to the bridge where yet more carnage is unleashed thanks to Dom and Brian's new toy. Yet more vaults needed to be built for this scene. Spiro Rizatos, our stunt coordinator from the plane drop earlier, was responsible again for making sure this chaos was organised and safe. For the shot where a vault destroys a car with a head-on collision, the stunt team attached part of the vault to a semi-truck. To knock another car into the river, a crane was used to turn one of the these giant props into a pendulum, like a science lesson on steroids. And speaking of science, the next stunt had more science behind it than you might think. Number 2, F9 rocket car in space. This sequence needed input from NASA, even if it seemed like the idea came from a joke. This is of course when Roman and Tej get launched into orbit behind the wheel of a Pontiac Fiero. The funny thing behind this is that the whole thing did actually start off as a joke. Long-running Fast and Furious visual effects supervisor Alexander Vey pitched it to director Lin in the guise of Dom's crew having races on the moon. After the laughter died down, Lin decided there was something in it, but wanted to make sure there was some kind of scientific basis behind the sequence. He got on the phone to NASA and asked questions like, could such a capsule be launched from the ground? How much fuel would it need? Could underwater diving suits, like the ones worn in the car, stand up to extra orbital pressures? And could a Pontiac Fiero really survive in space? This led to additions seen in the movie like the Fiero being reinforced by Earl, Twinkie and Sean. These scenes were there to create a more believable story for liftoff. I'm sure NASA looks forward to the call from Lin on how to make Fast and the Furious moon drift believable. And this brings us on to our final stunt, one that's completely unbelievable but also completely breathtaking. Furious 7 Tower Jump. One of the most iconic stunts in the Fast and Furious franchise is the jump from one skyscraper to another in Abu Dhabi. Not once, but twice. This thrilling scene is one of the most memorable, but was it done for real? It's probably not too much of a spoiler to say that the crew didn't drive an incredibly rare Lykan Hypersport between two buildings. But saying that, they did drive a car through glass windows. This, however, wasn't done in Abu Dhabi. Even though the team spent around a week filming on location in the city, capturing aerial shots and smaller stunts, the real parts of the tower jump itself were filmed on a sound studio in Atlanta. Stunt coordinator Andy Gill has explained since filming Wrapped that the jump was never in mind to be done for real. Instead, the production team built multiple 40-foot tall glass and steel enclosures on the soundstage. A stunt driver then drove a Lykan Hypersport through each glass wall for real, and the rest of the scene was built in with CGI and special effects. Okay, what I just said isn't strictly true. The Lykan Hypersport is a $3.4 million one-of-a-6 limited edition supercar. So seeing as the team needed 6 cars for the stunts, they avoided wiping out the Hypersport out of existence by building 6 replicas instead. They used fiberglass in place of carbon fiber and the powertrain from a Porsche Boxster to create the replicas, then launched them through the windows instead of the original to avoid an almost $20 million bill.